Some interesting new developments in the case of a nurse who was put into Ebola quarantine 1 year ago tomorrow. Kaci Hickox, you'll remember her, landed at New Jersey's Newark airport after treating Ebola patients in West Africa and was taken right to an isolation tent outside a nearby hospital. She never contracted the virus, and now Hickox is suing Governor Christie and other state officials, claiming she was imprisoned against her will. The governor and now presidential candidate says this was a matter of public safety, so bring it on when it comes to the lawsuit. Let's talk about it with our legal panel. Fred Christie is a former federal prosecutor. Arthur Aidala is a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, Fox News legal analyst. Arthur, I'm sure that's not what your potential client, what you want your client to say publicly, bring it on when it comes to a lawsuit. But does Christie feel confident for a reason? Is there really a suit here?
He feels confident because he believes in his heart that what he did is the right thing. I think the issue, that the courts are going to look at is the words due process. In other words, a governor, him and of himself, cannot just decide, oh, I'm going to lock someone up, I'm going to keep someone behind bars, kind of unilaterally. There needs to be some sort of a process which is not in place. So, Jenna, I got to be honest with you. I think the best thing that comes out of this lawsuit will be helping future people who are in this position, whether it's governors or people who are going to be detained, to have some sort of a system in place.
And that's one of her complaints, Fred. But Christie actually talked about this at the time. Here's what he had to say about making this decision.
I don't believe when you're dealing with something as serious as this that we can count on a voluntary system. This is government's job. If anything else, the government's job is to protect the safety and health of our citizens. And so we've taken this action, and I absolutely have no second thoughts about it.
We can't forget the timing of it, Fred. We can't forget how scary it was. And we had nurses coming back. We had people getting sick. Right. We had people dying due to Ebola. Right. So did he make a reasonable decision for the circumstances as they were at the time?
Well, here's the most important part about this whole lawsuit. Even if he was wrong, Jenna, as long as he acted with some good faith beliefs, and in this case there was an epidemiologist, there's a SAT word for you, who was a doctor with the New Jersey Department of Health who was saying that this woman should be quarantined because one of the thermometer readings was indicating that she had a fever, although there was some question as to the accuracy of that. But remember, we're talking about Ebola. This was a time when people were very, very frightened. This was a time, this could have been a very, very dangerous situation. I mean, if she had infected someone who was immunocompromised, they would have died. So I'm sorry that the lady spent 72 hours kind of locked in a room watching Who's the Boss reruns, but unfortunately for her, that was the right course of action.
She said the conditions were bad, Arthur. She didn't get great cell phone reception, apparently. That was one of her complaints. But the conditions are part of this case. And you brought up a really interesting point, because we talk about this not in relation just to health quarantines that we're talking about now, but sometimes immigration or terrorism. One of the things that makes us an American citizen is that we can't just be detained for any reason and held against our will. So where did the circumstances in which she was held work for her or against her in this case?
No, it's definitely going to work for her. And it's not just she's sitting in a room watching Who's the Boss. Any of us, when we're deprived of our liberty, and I tell this sometimes to people when I lecture, just go in your own bathroom and close the door without your phone or anything. Just stay in your bathroom for 15 minutes and watch how bored you get. Watch how you start climbing the walls for 15 minutes. So our system of government does not allow the government just to unilaterally come in without due process of law and make these decisions. So I think what should happen here, Jenna, is but I think, Fred, this is how I think this case should wind up. They should give her a little bit of money for her pain and suffering or whatever, because she wasn't allowed to shower, she didn't have clothes. But they should say that the governor has to always have a panel of 2 or 3 people, right? So someone can break the tie.
But what about the timing on that, Fred? I mean, the time for a panel to get together and make a decision could be, the person's already out and about. I just want to mention, I was being a little sarcastic. She did say that she didn't have great phone reception, but she wasn't able to take a shower. There were just portable bathrooms. It was cold. It wasn't really set up appropriately. None of us, to Arthur's point, would really want to be there or have a family member there.
No, of course you wouldn't want to be there. Of course you wouldn't. And she had her freedom taken away, which is a very, very serious thing. And I'm not taking that lightly. But let's remember, I mean, when our government acts, they have to act reasonably. In this instance, he had doctors telling her that this may be an issue, and she was held for 72 hours. And yes, it's uncomfortable, and yes, it was inconvenience, but ultimately, had she been sick and had she infected someone, they could have died. And so at the end of the day, it's a balancing test.
Correct.
And I'm sorry, the government has the right to protect its citizens, and sometimes it means inconveniencing someone like this nurse.
No, and he's right. It is a balancing test. But don't forget, because Jenna, you brought up like people who about their immigration status is in question. This woman was a hero. I mean, she was over there she was trying to save lives, and she came back as a hero. At least if you have to quarantine her, put her in a nice room, give her a shower, give her a TV. I mean, treat her like the hero.
You know, it's interesting. We just did this story last week that one of the nurses that medical officials thought was cured of Ebola. Now, this woman never had it.
Right.
They thought she was cured of Ebola. Now is back in the hospital, and they're wondering if they really know enough about Ebola now, Fred, about whether or not anyone is cured from it at all. And what about the public risk of that? That's a brand new story. It just came up. I wonder if it'll impact this case.
Right, but again, hindsight's 20/20, Jenna. The question is, at the time, in the environment in which this decision was made, and based upon the information that had been provided to Governor Christie, did he act unreasonably, or did he act in bad faith, or I forget the exact buzzwords. I mean, ultimately, in a case like this, when you sue for your civil rights like this, even if the governor was wrong, that's not enough. I mean, if a police officer wrongfully arrests someone, ultimately, if it's shown that he was acting in good faith or he had based upon information that had been provided, we don't allow people to sue every time that happens.
Sure.
So you can't look back with 20/20 hindsight and say, pay up, Governor Christie, get your checkbook out. It doesn't work that way.
I got to go. You know, Fred forgot the buzzwords, but he remembered the SAT word.
Yeah,
Arthur.
well, he always has a big brain on Fred.
I got 620 in my verbal, so I don't know how I remembered any of that.
I'm glad you remember the score. That's great. Arthur, your SAT scores next time around.
Thank you.
We'll continue to
Better
follow
than
this
mine.
case, see where it goes. Fred and Arthur, thank you.